Hello and welcome everyone to the stream. My name is Matt Price, one of the hosts on today's call. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. So we've got a very special episode for you today in our partner webinar series, and that is modernizing your customers' data protection strategies with a little concept we've called ZTDR. And I'm going to save that for Anthony to really dig into. A couple quick housekeeping notes to get started with. We do want this to be interactive, and we've got a new way to hopefully encourage that today. We're actually going to be giving a giveaway or doing a giveaway, and we're going to be giving away a custom branded OOTB AirTag. I just happen to have an AirTag on my desk to actually give you guys the visual. This one's not the cool OOTB branded one, but we do have a really awesome AirTag with OOTB on it. So for those of you guys who are attentive and paying attention, we're going to be asking a question at the end, and the first one to give us the correct answer will actually get that OOTB AirTag. So I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like an awesome reason to hang around. So with that, Anthony, before we get started, why don't we just do a quick around the horn, make some quick introductions, and then we'll get things started.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. I'm kind of jealous. I want that AirTag for myself. I didn't realize it was OOTB branded. That's sick. Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Kusumano. I think y'all have seen me before. I'm object first type guy, and I'm happy to be here today to learn y'all some things about zero trust data resilience.
Hey, everybody. Pleasure to be here today. My name is Sterling Wilson, and I'm part of the team that's out there evangelizing ZTDR, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit here.
Absolutely. So super excited for this particular show because really when you look at modernizing data protection, there's a few different ways you can do that. And why don't we just roll right into this, Anthony? Let me bring up the slides and we'll let you run with this.
Roll we shall, or run, whatever verb you're choosing. So I think to understand zero trust data resilience first, it's really important that everyone level sets on zero trust. So what I want to show you real quick, and I'm really curious to hear y'all's feedback as well, is a light overview on the principles of traditional zero trust. Now, zero trust was actually created by a few different individuals and organizations, including CISA. And the idea was that production data and production apps and infrastructures needed better security when it comes to preparation for attack, breaches, ransomware, and pretty much anything malicious that could happen to your data center and your infrastructure inside of it. So there were some principles that came with zero trust. Some are a little more obvious than others, but the idea itself is really in the name, right? Zero trust. We have eliminated any ability for us to believe that we are safe or trust that things are just okay being left the way they are. So instead, we take on a guise of skepticism and a little bit of paranoia. And the principles here, I think, elevate that to the next level. So first things first, understanding access, and importantly, least privilege access. That means reducing the amount of permissions and roles that are given to individuals within the organization to appropriately match the level of access they would need. When you use least privilege access, it basically means just that. You are reducing the amount of access anyone would have to things they shouldn't. And by just doing that alone, production apps and infrastructure become all the more safe because you're whittling down the amount of risk that can come through social engineering, phishing, any kind of masked attack where someone's pretending to be someone they're not. Now, principle number 2 is don't implicitly trust. If whittling down access isn't enough, then having gates and checks in places, things like IAM, MFA, policy endpoint protection, policy decision points, those can really help ensure that people are who they say they are as they get through various parts and places inside of the process chain. They're always being validated. Because we're not trusting you are who you say you are, every step of your access journey needs to be checked. Kind of like you're going through the airport and they want to see your passport, your ID, and then there's the numerous checks that occur after that. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is the ultimate state of paranoia. Assume a breach state always. When you assume that they've already got inside your infrastructure, you're living in a state that basically says, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? If they're already in, what do they have access to that they shouldn't? And you start to think about your data a little bit differently, thinking about how can I segment things? How can I reduce the blast radius, assuming they're in, my A site? What does that mean for my B site or my C site? And by assuming breach and getting these principles of segmentation, you can drastically reduce the amount of blast that occurs when the breach becomes an attack. Just curious to hear what Sterling, Matt, what do you think about the principles of zero trust as they stand today?
So one of the things for me, Anthony, that was described to me that I really think is a great analogy is when you think about some of the old movies you may have seen where you've got the old castle with the moat built around it.
Yeah.
To me, this is like a perfect visual in your head about the way things used to be. You built the moat with the assumption that as long as the bridge is up, nobody's getting in. That's your perimeter, basically your edge protection. But if anybody got into the castle, well, they had full reign to the castle. There weren't any locks, or they all had a single key. Nowadays, when you look at zero trust, not only do you need that edge protection, but every single room inside the castle needs a unique key. So when you look at segmentation and a way to break all that stuff off to just increase the security, A to Z, that's one of the ways that kind of helps visualize it. And, from a previous life, one of the things that I saw, actually put into practice with this is when we were doing VMCA on the Veeam side, which is their certified architect, training program. It was always secure by design was one of the core principles, that Veeam had. So even though Veeam's got a ton of different capabilities and services and roles and components, you don't necessarily need to deploy all those unless you need that one component. So it's
Right.
You think about it, secure by design as you go. That applies to us with backup storage as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, I think for infrastructure architects as myself, when you think about the idea of zero trust, sort of seems counterintuitive. The idea for us to build these architectures was to share data because people needed to gather and cooperate on these projects that they're working on. But as we know, this is a new world. We now have bad guys and bad teams that are working together to steal this data. And as we'll discuss here a little more, data is our most valuable asset. And the bad guys know that. So we have to have a new way to really look at how we store the data and how we protect ourselves from those types of attacks. In other words, this is the new world, and this is our best key against that.
That's absolutely right, Sterling. And I think you hit the nail on the head exactly to set us up for the next part of this is everything we've talked about so far is really focused on larger applications and infrastructure. But the data, specifically the backup data, I don't think has been treated fairly when it comes to zero trust, mostly in that there hasn't been a policy or a principle that was created the same way zero trust was for apps and infrastructure for backup specifically. So that's where ZTDR comes in. So some of you might have heard this already, and if you haven't, happy to fill you in. Zero Trust Data Resilience is a brand new methodology that was created by Numberline and Veeam to be the de facto way to create the securest backup infrastructure possible. It takes the principles of zero trust and expands on them and targets them specifically for backup software and backup storage. We saw that there was a huge gap in the original zero trust sort of methodology. ZTDR is the salve for that. And I'd actually like to take a few minutes just to kind of talk through. You can see all the principles in the center of pillar here, and they line up pretty one-to-one. But on the right, these key attributes, I think these are worth digging into and expanding on a little more because as partners and as resellers who are going out and talking about Veeam and Object First and various software and storage solutions, it's important to do a check on everything to make sure that these attributes are implemented as part of the software you're selling. So first up, easy one. So I'm going to take it for myself. Segmentation, right? When you think about your backup software and your backup storage, these should never be one and the same. If you assume a breach state, putting your backup storage and your backup software in the same box simply means everything is breached now. Everything is lost. By segmenting and separating the software from the storage and applying a really strong 321 policy, 32110 for extra security, what you end up creating is a completely segmented infrastructure that if one part gets breached, it means the rest of it may be fine, especially in good network architecture with good validation of trust along the way. So as you look at solutions out there and as you think about how you can sell both solutions like Veeam and Object First, think about how we separate ourselves from each other, right? Veeam is a standalone backup software. It runs on its own server. Object First UTB, same principle. We run on a hardened Linux box that we've custom tuned to be the most secure ransomware proof storage target for Veeam. We're implementing segmentation by very nature of what we are. And we think this is a boon when it comes to becoming ransomware resilient for Veeam users. Now, Sterling, what do you think about backup storage immutability?
You know, immutability. Honestly, when we talk about immutability at the root, what the heck does that even mean? It basically means it offers the max data integrity that Anthony was just talking about. You cannot change that data or those bits until certain factors are met, whether it be time or anything else. So once it's written, it can't be changed. This was always good for things like legal holds, government institutions, things that had to, by legal requirements, save data, hold on to data. Lately, we've seen, as we're talking about today, there's one huge, huge reason to think about, and people are being forced to adopt immutable storage. And that, of course, is ransomware attacks. In fact, many insurance requirements now require you to make sure that your data can't be owned by these bad guys, as well as you're able to recover from a ransomware attack. So all of these things mean your customers, your valued customers are looking for these requirements that they have to meet. They're looking to make out-of-band purchases to upscale their backup storage. You know, everybody says it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And we need to get ahead of that game, which is why customers are actually looking for solutions that are easy, that are simple, that are powerful, that you can plug in and make sure that their data stays safe. Once again, immutability is not just a nice to have, it's an absolute need to have, along with the proper permissions. Speaking of proper permissions, what do you think, Matt, about the zero access part?
I like the layup, Sterling. Thanks. I think it's this really rounds out the three key attributes, and for me, they're all important, but this one is fundamentally mission critical in today's world. And you said it, Sterling. You know, when we think about what customers were really thinking about when they purchased backup storage 3, 5, 7 years ago, it's fundamentally different than what is facing our customers today, you know, with all the different attacks coming in. And I feel like one of the things that oftentimes is overlooked, we think about ransomware and we think about holding that data hostage. And, you know, certainly if you've got an ironclad solution in place, it's immutable, they can't then go encrypt that data. So there's nothing they can really do to hold it hostage. But what about exploitation of data? So this is another key area that's critical when you look at best practices. And I had the ticker running about the best storage for Veeam, because the reason why we are the best storage for Veeam, if you're leveraging the best practices and using encryption on the Veeam side, and then landing that data onto OOTB, which is also immutable with zero access to root or even the command line itself, not only are you protecting from the ransomware attack, but you're also protecting against that potential of exploiting of data. Let's say they got credit card numbers, social security numbers. They could just leak that, right? It's not necessarily holding you hostage to pay a ransom in Bitcoin. It could be, look, we're just going to drop this on the internet. So there's different types of malicious attacks. And really the third type of attack is that insider threat. And that's not gone anywhere. You know, you mentioned it earlier, Anthony, there's bad actors, there's groups of people that will do things like this. And if your backup storage is immutable, but still has administrator privileges or still has root access or even still can present a command line, there's a potential for that storage device to be compromised. And that's why you look at all this together, the zero trust data resilience is so fundamentally critical to your customers and ensuring that data is not compromised in any of the different ways we've chatted about. And certainly having no access to a command line and no root user, I mean, it couldn't get more ironclad than that. That's essentially back to the castle with the moat with no drawbridge, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, I wanted to build on something and double down on the point you just said. I think it's often overlooked when people think about ransomware and ransomware attacks. And that's the idea, not that they're just coming in and locking down your data and asking for money. The idea of exfiltration of data cannot be overlooked. And that is why it's one key reason that it's not just good enough to just have immutable data. there needs to be the segmentation of the actual permissions as well. Once they steal your data, whether you pay them or not, all of that data is going on to the black market to be sold again and again. And if you're hit once, they will come back to hit you again. So I just wanted to double down, because that is a very poignant point you made there.
It absolutely is. And I love the discussion here. And I think it fits perfectly with what we're going to talk about next, which is just the proper ZTDR architecture, right? Like, how do we stop them from putting your data on the black market? And this is how. Yeah. So if you're a reseller and you're looking at this and you're saying, well, like, how do I go about doing this? This is it, right? This is how you do it. So firstly, you think about 3-2-1, 3 was always 3 copies of your data, one of which is production. You can see that over here on the left, right? Nothing changes there. Hopefully your production is following zero trust principles, but maybe that's outside of your control. Maybe you're focused solely on the backups and the software and the storage. Perfectly fine. That's what we're here to educate you on. When it comes to backup software, you can see we've highlighted it yellow. It's an attack surface. We know that bad actors go after the backup software now, because that's where immediately people go when the breach occurs. They want to hit that recovery point. So the backup software is a primary target, and depending on where it resides, it may be weaker or stronger based on the security that was set up on that infrastructure. So it's important that is segmented by itself, separated from the storage. Now, what you can see here, we're using S3 to communicate with our target appliance. Maybe it's an OOTB. I mean, I hope it's an OOTB, but utilizing S3 ensures you're using the latest object storage. It ensures you're able to take advantage of features like that immutability Sterling was talking about on the previous slide. And it's also important to note, not all immutability is created equal. Just because you're using S3 and writing to immutable storage does not mean the vendor is ensuring that it's not in governance mode, meaning that they could factory reset the box, or they could go in and administratively delete it. Check that your immutability is in compliance. It is inalterable. It's untouchable. It follows that zero access principle, like Matt was saying, for that first touch. And then on your third side, your capacity tier, again, it should be immutable every step of the journey, whether it's going to a public cloud, another OOTB, or another OOTB at a secondary data center. It should always be immutable every step of the way, taking advantage of that latest and greatest S3 storage technology. What do y'all think about this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with this more and everything you said, Anthony. And for me, just 2 key areas that I want to double down on things you've already said. The attack surface is fundamentally, it has to exist with the backup software, because the backup software has to be able to access those sources. So just by design, there is a large potential attack vector there. When you look at traditional backup storage, let's call it legacy storage, that probably many of your customers still have deployed, whether it's a JBOD, an old NAS, maybe a repurposed SAN, or what have you. Typically, those are accessed via iSCSI, SMB, CIF. So you're going to see them registered in the backup software. Assuming we're talking about a Windows-based application, you may see that as a drive letter. So when you think about a potential bad actor or ransomware or virus or anything like that, that's automatically exposed as a potential method to crawl and infiltrate more data, right? So when you look at S3, that's natively not visible as a drive letter. That's API communication. So already you haven't eliminated that as an attack vector, but you've certainly minimized that as a potential vulnerability of just discovery, right? So the other thing that Anthony mentioned, I think, is absolutely critical. I've been pounding this drum for years now, is the 3-2-1. But if you take it a step further and you look at any of the Veeam documentation, it's 3-2-1-1-0. So essentially everything that Anthony said, 3 copies, 2 different media types, 1 being offsite. 1 fundamentally needs to be immutable, encrypted, and secure, A to Z. That way it can't be infiltrated or exploited. The other one, though, is testing. It's critical today, and it's certainly important to your customers. Before you go to all the extra lengths, let's say, to get this data offsite, let's test it first. Let's make sure that what you're about to send to the cloud, your second data center, wherever your site may be, has actually been verified as recoverable. Because otherwise, you may be marking this data, immutable, sticking it in a vault, it's ironclad, but it had corruption of another type or kind, right? So that's why testing is so fundamentally critical. And OOTB has been designed exclusively with Veeam's best practices in mind. You don't have to change block sizes. There's no special configuration you have to make. And it's powerful enough to be able to drive that sure backup verification testing. And Veeam's even enhanced that in the latest version where you can do randomized testing, different scheduling. So they're trying to make it easier for, customers to test those backups. So I think if you're following this and you're assuming a breach everywhere, that's fundamentally critical to test, and test again.
I just want to call out one thing, Matt. You said whether you're on a JBot or an Old NAS. Old NAS was my hip hop name in high school. So just get away from that if possible. Sterling, I'm curious. What do you think about all this?
I love that. That was actually pretty good, Anthony. Old NAS. I'm totally calling you that from now on. That's awesome. I'm just still over here shuddering from Matt talking about testing. Okay. I mean, when I think about testing way back, does anybody remember before cloud and we replicated to data centers and we had to test by failing, making all the systems work, make sure all of them work and then failing back? Good Lord. Yeah. So I remember all those things. It makes me cringe, but it really drives down the idea that we don't have a choice today. Back then, I have to be honest with you, even internally with some places, banks and government installations, half the time those daggone failovers didn't even work without a lot of extra things. So the idea that we can test these things and test these backups using some of Veeam's tools and the way that UPI can ingest that data, there's really no excuse for that 32110. And just like Matt, I've been talking about 321 forever. The new thing here, of course, are these ransomware attacks and the way they've proliferated, the way they're stealing our data. It's not just about a legal hold. It's not just about making sure somebody accidentally deleted the Word document. These are real professionals that are locking up your data and asking for a ton of money. So you need to know that, number one, you can bring it back. And with all the S3 protocols, with all of that goodness that's locked in that we've learned from the cloud, we've also seen some instances of how difficult it can be for that initial recovery from the cloud. So we're basically taking all of that goodness, all of that security, all of the user friendliness of the UI that we've come to expect and making sure that it's right there, ready and available in a box that can bring us back at a moment's notice. And I think that's the most important thing.
Hashtag it's always DNS, right, Sterling?
Amen. Say no more.
Well, it's funny. We've all talked about 321. And, I think in many ways, 321 was a great sort of primer to get us ready for the current devastating age of attack that we live in. But I think it oversimplifies things. And I think we became really, sort of lazy when it came to building better backup, which is why ZTDR really hits the mark when it comes to making a more secure backup infrastructure. But real quick, I just want to hit on this one fast. When we think about what makes a non-ZTDR environment, we took a look at the market today, and just far too often, whether it's on-prem or cloud, we saw people putting all their eggs in a single basket. And, a saying doesn't make it this far into history, like all eggs in one basket, if it didn't carry some credibility and weight, right? Like eggs are the oldest thing since the dawn of time. So the risk here, it's pretty clear to see. As soon as you do that, when you land everything in a single appliance, it's backup and storage, or when you go in a cloud infrastructure and it's all nested within a cloud provider inside of an ESX with your storage and your backup software in the same ESX host, all it takes is one failure of account credentials compromising, or loss of the physical server, or a network outage, and suddenly recovery becomes impossible. And also, it's just worth pointing out, this doesn't follow the model of 321 either. As simple as it is, it's not zero trust data resilient. It's not even 321. So I just wanted to kind of end here, and so far as our presentation goes, to really hit the mark on evaluate where you are today. Think about, what's the worst thing that happens? What if they got your credentials? What if they turned off your network? What if they got access to your backup software? What happens next? Are you in a recoverable state? Can you get there? How long is it going to take? And if you start asking your customers that question, I think you'll find that ZTDR is the perfect blueprint to getting to a better place in data security without having to do much additional lift by utilizing software like Veeam and Object First.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I just wanted to say that, it's tough. I mean, zero trust is an entire daggone framework. I get it. It's just the idea that the customers just hit the easy button. You know, they got these applied because they had to check the box. I have to have a way to get my backup. I have to have the way to get it back. We need to move with the times. We want to make sure your customers that you're going to, that trust you, we want to make sure that they have what they need without overcomplicating things.
Yes.
And so we're talking about this immutable storage, UTB in particular. It's simple, it's secure, and it's powerful. When people think of zero trust and zero trust principles, you know, they almost glaze over because it's just so much to take on. And so the idea is we understand why they were in that monolithic, you know, process there, but these are the reasons why we need to have these conversations, and we're here to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think we've kind of hit on this a little bit, but, you know, it gives me a perfect segue to do a shameless plug of our box to backup series. Because, you know, one of the things that you may be thinking, and, you know, we've gone through this and you look at the slide and there's certainly a lot going on. This can be simple to implement. And if you just look at the fundamental basics, UTB is out of the box immutable, just like in the name. It has zero access to root, zero access, you know, to any type of command line. So automatically you've got that going for you, and it only takes 15 minutes to get this thing rocking and rolling. So when you look at just the simplicity of rolling this into your customer environment, it's not a complicated endeavor. So when you look at this, it can be a very lucrative velocity play, you know, for you as a potential partner, when you can just drop these in, when more and more customers are getting, you know, tasked with getting that checkbox of having immutability, whether it's for insurance reasons or just company directives. So this really does make it easy. We've recorded a 5-part little mini series. It only takes 15 minutes to get this thing from the box to actually ingesting Veeam backup. So it really couldn't be easier. Be sure to check that out on our YouTube channel.
I couldn't agree more, Matt. And it's not just because I'm in the videos. It's actually a pretty great series. So I actually want to throw it back to our audience. I hope you learned a lot today. And more importantly than that, I hope you're ready to win an AirTag. The question that you need to answer is, what were the 3 key attributes that we showed earlier when it comes to zero trust data resilience? If you remember, I'll give you a visual clue. It was that purple box in the slide, and Matt Sterling and I each answered one of the key attributes, and we had some pretty good layups and handoffs, if I may give ourselves a pat on the back for that. So reply in the chat with what they were, and we will await your answer. And the first person that gets it will get that custom branded object first AirTag, which I'm just jealous.
I actually have 2 of these. Can I trade these in for awesome UTB branded? I'm asking for a friend.
Is it a 2-for-1? Do you have to trade in 2 AirTags to get the one branded one?
That might be worth it.
And Matt, while they might be typing in their answers, would you mind one more time putting up that QR code for the ZTDR information? So Absolutely. If you found this presentation helpful today and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to learn a lot more about this, we actually have a lot more information to share with you. Veeam and Numberline have produced an in-depth research paper that covers everything from top to bottom for becoming zero trust data resilient. It's technical, it's deep, and it's educational. So if this tickled the back of your brain and you think, hey, I could actually do this, I'd like to learn more on implementing, this is the place to go. This will link you to our white paper, and from there you can find the Numberline research. It's absolutely worth the read. I highly recommend it. You know, I think that's all we have to share with you today. We're waiting to see if any of y'all have interest in that AirTag. Otherwise, if we don't get an answer in, say, the next minute, what we're going to do is we're going to hoard that for ourselves, and you won't get an opportunity. Oh, it looks like we have one.
Nice.
We do. It came from YouTube.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. Very cool.
Can we show that? Can we show that on the screen? Is that possible? Give them, yeah. The AFOL Garage got it. Segmentation, backup immutability, and zero access to root. We will be reaching out to you to give you that AirTag. Thanks for paying attention and sending in that answer. Great job.
So let me throw this up right here. Make sure you scan that to get your prize rolling.
Scan that QR code, AFOL Garage. I want to say AOL Garage, but you're not the CDs that were cluttering my dad's garage.
Exactly.
Sweet.
All right.
Make sure you scan that code. It'll be a form. You can fill out your details, and we'll get that AirTag rolling to you, man.
That's awesome. Congratulations, and thank you for that participation.
Yes, thank you.
Good stuff. So guys, final thoughts before we wrap this up.
I'll kick it off by saying that we understand it can be a heavy lift for the zero trust. The reason why we want to talk to you today is to make sure your customers understand what's ahead of them and that the road doesn't have to be a super bumpy, unpaved one. Starting with the immutable storage is the way to go. And it's a very easy add-on to your Veeam streams. And we're here to talk about it more with you.
Yeah, for me, it's simple. This was created because of a need, right? We saw the need that Zero Trust wasn't covering backup and backup storage specifically in the principles. So we had to create something new. And education's always key. Matt talked about testing. Sterling talked about implementing. It's important that we stay vigilant in educating ourselves. I've talked about this on this webinar and many others before, but we can't ever stop learning. So take the time to think about what you heard today, go learn more, and always stay up to date on all things security, because the one thing we know is true is that the hackers are constantly finding new ways to get in because they never stop learning.
Yeah. I don't think I've got anything else to add other than just echoing what these two fine gentlemen just said. I think it's always DNS. We can live and die by that, right, Sterling, on testing. I remember those days. So yeah, I feel like everything that we've talked about today is just truly designed to help your customers be better protected and safeguarded for any type of future threats and existing threats, that are out there in the space. And, I think you mentioned it earlier, Sterling. This is a great opportunity for out-of-band upgrades because of the reason storage was purchased, 3, 5, 7, even shorter, years ago. There were different reasons and different justifiers. So I think this definitely begs looking at the environment to make sure it's hardened and make sure everyone, certainly your loyal customers, are protected from ransomware and other type of threats. So with that, guys, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already on there. If you happen to be watching us on LinkedIn, feel free to hop over to YouTube and subscribe. We're going to be putting out a lot more videos. We've got some exciting new stuff we're going to be launching in the coming months. So with that, guys, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate you tuning in. Until the next episode, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Get that old NAS out of your data center.
I love it.